Hi, everybody. Hi, chit chatters. Let's learn for an hour, and then you guys can stay as long as you want to chit chat. How about that? But I love that everyone is so excited to see each other every week. Okay, so I'm very excited and a little nervous to present all that I want to present today. So I asked my dear friend and scholar in residence, she really is, Susie Futterman, to sit near me with the Chumash opened. Is that okay? Yeah, I recorded. Yeah. I asked Susie to sit with me with the Chumash and to kind of like jump in at any point, really jump in, because we do this for each other. We've taught classes where I jumped in, but I don't want to be reading it in the book because I want to be gleaning the lessons. So when we do it in the book, that's usually we do that on Saturdays on Parsha Pearls. But there's what we're trying to do today, and if we have like a teacher in the audience, lots of teacher types over here. So maybe I will give these massive Post-it notes to maybe Gail. I feel like Gail, are you? I just want you to get a marker. And as we go through, there's markers probably in the top drawer over there. You can find one, Judy, possibly. Yeah, a pen, a marker. Oh, Julie has over here. Okay, we have. And as we go through the lessons, you guys could literally just shout out or just tell Gail to add the traits. Because what we're trying to do is to pull the amazing traits out of the lessons and the stories and the lives of the mothers, the four mothers. Okay, so that's kind of, is that okay? So Susie's going to be like the sources, and we'll see, like, I don't, you could do them in English, like we could go deeper. There's the actual source, there's the commentaries, and actually maybe I'll start with this little lesson that there are 4 levels of understanding according to Judaism. So the first level, the most shallow level, is called pshat, which is at face value. So that's usually where people stop, right? When you read something, pshat in Hebrew is like at face value. It's the most simplistic level of understanding. And that's like, all of us who may have learned things throughout our lives, or we might have been at, Sunday school, which many of us refer to as Jew jail back in the day. So yes, it's true. So pshat, hey, shin, ket. So many of us stop our understanding over there because we read something, it might bother us because sometimes on a surface level, it doesn't really talk to us. But then we have three more levels. So the next level, according to Judaism, is called remez, which means it's hinted. It's almost like code, that something is a little off, or it's missing a letter, or it has an extra word or something like that, which tells us a bigger story about it. So that's the remez, the hints. And then the deeper one is called drash. And drash is the root of the word midrash. A midrash or a medrash is a story that's gleaned from a teaching. So we have lots of midrashim that we refer to when we're learning the Torah. We're learning it hand in hand with deeper commentaries that might not be written in the Torah. And we say, oh, that's the medrash. The medrash says, and then it tells us the whole beautiful interpretation. So we have to understand where that's coming from. So it's pshat, that's face value. Remez is hints. Drash is a deeper commentary. It's what's gleaned from. And then the deepest level is called sod. And sod means secret. And not all of us are ever going to get to that level. I personally, I'm 41 years old. I'm turning 42. But until you're 40, you actually are not allowed to learn Kabbalah. Did you know that? Did you know? I know, I'm such a baby. But I'm such a baby, yes. So until 40 years old, you're not allowed to learn Kabbalah, because you don't have the tools, the life experience to even understand it. So someone that's a little bit lacking the maturity and experiences of life that will learn Kabbalah might only see it at face value. And we can't really get into what it really, really is talking about until you have a lot of experience in life. And that's why they say after 40, then you could actually begin. That's when you could like tip your baby toe into the Kabbalah. Okay, so that's the deepest esoterical realms, the secrets of Judaism. So what I'm going to try to do today, and please Hashem help me, and please thank God Susie is next to me, because it's a little bit, it's a lot to bite all at once. I want to delve into the life of the matriarch Sarah. But many of us only know it at the simplistic level. And I want to go deeper today. I want to understand, who is this woman? And Gail's going to be writing down all her traits. Okay, and anything that jumps out at you, like from the stories, we're going to try to not only see it at face value, but to glean from the hints and from the stories, because we will be sharing some of the commentary, some of the midrashim, which is the deeper level, and maybe even we could tap in to some of the sod, some of the secrets about this individual that till this day we try to emulate. So we have to understand. And by the way, the blessing that we give our children, let's say on Friday night, the traditional blessing. So what we say to our daughters is, may you be like Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, right? We know more about Kim Kardashian than we know about Sarah. It's true. All of us do. So we have to, no, not you, but trust me, if we took two women and started, quizzed about, some of the pop star culture out there, we see it, it's in front of us. We're just, in the tabloids in the supermarket, like it's more in our face than our own mothers. And so we're going to try to change that. Okay. So where to begin? So let's think about the Torah flow. Okay. We just started 2 weeks ago with the book of Genesis, right? We started the first chapter, Bereshit, about the creation. And then the next chapter is the book of Noah and the flood. That was last week. Now we're going into, it's going to start picking up speed, because now we're starting with Abraham. Okay, Abraham and Sarah. And it's Bereshit, Noah. Now we're in Lech Lecha. We're going to also talk about Vayera. We're like ahead of the game over here. So Lech Lecha, Vayera. And then the third one is called Chaya Sarah, which means the life of Sarah. But Laura, you know that in the very first line of that third book, it says Sarah dies. And what we're learning from that, just that one line, the remez, that the hinting to that is showing that even a great person, after they die, they are still alive. Because the title of that chapter is called The Life of Sarah. Even after she dies, her legacy lives on forever. And that's what we want to emulate. How could we be that person that after 120, we will live on forever through our deeds, which is one of the lessons that we learned last week in Parshat Noah, by the way, for those of us here that may not have children. So it actually says, these are, what does it say? Aleph, Toldot, Noah. These are the generations of Noah. And you would think it would go on to say who his offspring are, but it doesn't. It goes on to say about his deeds, that his generations, what he left in the world, is not only his offspring, which is kind of like a little bit of a relief, especially to the ones over here that are raising kids and teens. Okay, yes, us. And it's really, really hard. And we're like, what is going to be the outcome of this child? And we feel so responsible that it's not on us. It's not on us. Like, that is not our offspring. The way that they turn out is not dependent on us, and we're not responsible for the outcome. We're responsible to do our best part, and the rest is up to God. What we're leaving here, our legacy, is what we leave, what we have done with all the tools that God has given us. Okay, so phew, for some of us that are like, I'm going to strangle this kid. Okay, so we have Lech Lecha, Vayera, Chaya Sarah. That's going to be the scope of what we're going to tap into today. So 3 parshiot, which is a lot. And we're going to try to just highlight some of the things that teach us about who this person was. Okay, so we're going to start with Lech Lecha. And before we actually go into the sources and into some of the deeper teachings, I want to tell you my personal connection to this parsha. So we all have our favorite, right? A lot of us love Noah, right? If you're an animal lover, right? And that one always like brings people to life. In comes the animals, two by two. Like it brings back good memories from our youth. It was such a happy Parsha until you get to the end where there's, destruction again and all that. But yes, my favorite is Lech Lecha, which is when God says to Abraham, go forth, Lech Lecha me'artzecha u'mimoladecha, go forth, go for yourself from your land, from your relatives, from your father's house to the land that I will show you. So a lot of you know my personal path, right? And when people ask me, where are you from? I have to say, like, give me a second. Because I was born in Montreal. My family moved to Calgary, Alberta. I grew up in Toronto. That's usually the easy answer. I'm like, I'm from Toronto, but there was like chapter 1 and 2 before that. And then I met my husband in Israel, where I got married, lived for 12 years in Israel. Then our rabbi sent us to Denver, Colorado. This was not a going home. This was like, we don't know one person in the United States of America, and we're Canadian and South African, right? So it was not easy. $30,000 in lawyers' fees later, and 7 years of a lot of hard work and meetings and lawyers and all that, we finally got our green cards. We're still under that status. We're not American, right? So from Denver after 4 years, Portland, 7 years, and now Deerfield. It's been a journey, right? I don't know what it's like to have roots in a place, okay? My heart is in Israel. My family is in Toronto. Gadi's family's in South Africa and Israel. All, it's like, where are we? Like, seriously. So I connect to the story because there is a greater, there's something that is driving each move. It's literally waking up in the morning and knowing that we're about to make a big move and holding on to God, because there's no one else to hold on to. There's no one that you can rely on. It's yourselves and your higher power, and saying, God, how can I serve you? And that's how it's been. It's never been, we've always only made a big move if we felt like this is where we could serve the Jewish people and God in the best way. So I connect to this story on many deep levels. And I always felt like I was kind of like a self-made woman, like we all feel that way, right? Like it wasn't. And then it hit me at one point, like, how did we do this? Like, how did we choose to have such an unconventional life? Like most people settle down, right? We've never owned a home and lived in it, like never, right? And that's like, there's a little bit of instability to that life. Like my kids don't know what it's like to like invest in a home and plant seeds and plant a garden. I've never done that before, right? So, but I always felt like this is just our path, like our chosen path. But then it hit me. Think of where Gadi and I are coming from. So my parents, like my father was born in Germany right after World War II in a DP camp. He moved to Montreal, where he lived until he was an adult, married my mother in Montreal. They embarked upon a journey to Calgary, Alberta, right? Which was so, like, they left their family, they left everything behind. They wanted an adventure. They literally wanted like the beautiful, like the Rocky Mountains and the Calgary Stampede and all of that. And they got a lot more than they bargained for, because that's where they found Hashem. That's where they found their connection to Judaism. And then they picked up and moved to Toronto to give us that Jewish life, because it was a strong Jewish community in Toronto. And now, after so many years, my parents, at the age of 75 years old, are embarking upon Aliyah. They're making Aliyah. Like, this is their lifelong dream. And it's like, so I can't say that I became a self-made person and I am who I am. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. There has been this energy of going out into the unknown. And I think that's a big part of who I am. I'm not afraid, because if you have God with you, and if you feel, I don't know, some amount of clarity, not that we ever have complete clarity, but you just feel an inner, like, it's going to be okay. You could do anything. And Gadi's family, the same. They went from Morocco and Tunisia to Israel. They had their teens in Israel. They married. They embarked upon a journey to South Africa. They barely knew English. They spoke Moroccan and Arabic and Hebrew. but they came to South Africa and they lived there for like 35 years doing their outreach and then finally back to Israel. So it's definitely in our DNA, I think. Yes, it's definitely in our kishkis, and it's not very easy. I wouldn't suggest it to just anybody, but it's also very meaningful if you know your why. Okay, so Abraham and Sarah, they were called Ivri. Okay, now Ivri is a word for a Jew. Okay, a Jew is called an Ivri, but the root of that word is Aver, Ayin Bet Resh, which means across, the other side. So like we have this word a lot in the Torah when it says Me'aver Hayardi, on the other cross of the Jordan River, right? On the other side. So Abraham and Sarah were not typical. They were called other siders. That was their nickname, Avraham HaIvri, because the whole world was doing one thing and they were doing something else. They were unconventional. They were, I mean, I would say they had a very exciting life. And I would also say that I had a very exciting life. It should continue. Maybe not so exciting for the next little while. It's just, but yes. Yes, please.
Okay. To support what
Okay, so they had to be very strong. I don't know if you're writing, there's a strength there. There's this unconventional or not being afraid to do what's not popular, what hasn't been done. They're charting their own path. They're going out into the unknown, and that takes a certain amount of strength. What's that word? Whoever knows Eliza Bulow, I think a lot of you know, my mentor. So when she shares the story of how her daughter marries a man that's a paraplegic, which is very unconventional. Like she was a regular, healthy, normal girl who falls in love on a shidduch date, but decides, like love in her mind and then will follow through in her heart, decides to marry this man, and they're not going to have a normal life. So I can't remember the word she uses when she speaks about this, but she says that people would come up to her in the supermarket and say, oh, well, first of all, people said all types of awkward things like, is everything okay with your daughter? You know, is she gonna be able to have kids? You know, like things like in the supermarket, you know? And people would say to her, will she be able to have an ordinary life? And what Eliza said was, no, she's not. She's not going for ordinary. She's going for extraordinary. And I love that line.
like you're not here. Abraham from the other. One side of a moral and spiritual divide.
So there's the physical level that, yeah, he actually moved. So he's an other sider because he came from the other side. But then we're going deeper. So the other side means in his head, in his actions, in what he's going to do in the world. It's never been done before. Like he's about to bring monotheism to the world and literally get up on a soapbox, and everywhere he goes, that is his mission. to bring the light of Hashem into the world and to teach about it until the day that he dies. And nothing is going to stand in his way. And trust me, there were many, many tests that he had to endure that almost broke him, but he didn't break. Okay, so I'm going to jump in now we're going to try, even though so much of the storyline is about Abraham and Sarah, I'm trying to focus on Sarah, okay? So when Sarah was born, her birth name was not Sarah, okay? Actually, Sarah is her third name. Her name is changed. She has three names, okay? So the first name is Yiska. Has anyone heard that Jewish name before? Yiska. I've had one friend in school with that name, Yiska. And what that name means actually is to gaze, right? Yeah, to gaze. To gaze, okay? And it could be because her physical beauty, right? On a physical level, Sarah was one of the four most beautiful people there's only four people that are written about their beauty in the Torah. She's one of them. So you would look at her, you would gaze at her beauty, okay? That could be on a very, very face value level. But what it also means is that she's a visionary. Like when her parents gave her that name, they had Ruach HaKodesh. They had a dose of prophecy. It's the only prophecy that's left in this world today is when we name our children. We have 1/60th of prophecy. So when her parents gave her that name, Yiska, it means seer or visionary. And little did her parents know, because by the way, Sarah and Rivka, Rachel, and Leah all grew up in homes of idolatry and immorality. So talk about going against the grain. They didn't take in the culture around them. They weren't absorbing all of the negativity. They still were able to, it's amazing. It's actually amazing because we have nature and nurture, right? And they didn't take in the nurturing of their environment. So Yiska, we see that her parents, although they weren't, on a very good path, a very moral path, they still had prophecy that would show that she is to become a prophetess. She is one of the prophets. Hashem talks to her. She has a very close connection with Hashem. She sees things. She sees what is supposed to happen. She sees it all the way till the end of days. So that's her first name, okay? Now her second name, where we open the Torah, I don't know if you have it, where they have her first, like, Sarai? Do you want to find where it says it? Want to read it for me? Okay, so so Abraham and Sarah, the way that we call them, those were not their names. Okay, so before, like chapter 1 of their marriage, it was Sarai and Avram or Abram. Okay, and Hashem said, I'm going to add a hey to Sarai, so it's going to become Sarah, and I'm going to add from Avram to Abraham, I'm adding a hey to Abraham, so it's Abraham, okay? And what we learned from this, what the deeper meaning, because they were struggling at this point of their lives. Sarah was 90 years old and she was barren, and she knew that she was supposed to be the foremother of the Jewish people. And she had, who knows what she went through, but she didn't have a womb, right? Maybe she had a hysterectomy. Like, I don't know if they had it back in the day, but she didn't have a womb. She was, first of all, she was past menopause, but she didn't even have a womb. So in order to make this happen, that she will become a mother, miracles needed to happen. So that's another thing that we see about Sarah. Sarah, her story teaches us that we are worthy of miracles happening, and miracles can help. Her whole story, everything, there were so many miracles in just their survival through all the hardships, miracles and miracles and miracles. Okay, so she is kind of a miraculous individual, but she's also very normal. We're not whitewashing any of the mistakes the foremothers made. They all are flawed because they're human. And I'll tell you guys just something really interesting. A couple years ago, probably like 10, 15 years ago, a book came out in Israel, and it was called The Making of a Gadol. Okay, don't try to buy it on Amazon because it was banned. Okay, my husband actually, this is like, talk about like, different interests that people have. My husband was so obsessed with buying this book that he spent $400 on a photocopy of it. Okay, because he wanted to read it. Why was it banned? Someone spent years writing about all the great people of the previous generation, like the great rabbis and rebbitzins and teachers and all these great minds of Judaism. And they wrote it from a very humanistic way, that they're just regular, flawed people. And there was a whole debate. How could you tell these stories of their flaws and their failures when it kind of takes them off a pedestal? Like people were fighting about this, and it actually was taken out of print and it was banned, taken off the shelves, because there's one thought that we should tell people about their stories and their humanity and their struggles, because then we could relate to it. And then maybe we could even aspire for greatness. If they came from not such a great place and they built themselves up, maybe so too, maybe I could, right? So that was one train of thought. And there was a very, very powerful train of thought in the Jewish world that said you can't talk about like their regular challenges because it takes them down. And we need these role models to be up there. So where do you guys hold? Like, who thinks we should have this book? Yeah, me too. We have it. You guys can see it in our house. It's like a very, very thick photocopied, like bound book. And we learned so much about people's lives, but it was voted to not sell this. Okay. So, but let's go to God and the Torah. God doesn't whitewash anything. So when we go through the stories, we see their humanity. We're not going to avoid, the affairs that happened and the mistakes and sometimes they have good intentions in their mind, but the action is wrong. Sometimes the intent is bad, but the action is good. So we kind of know all of that. Okay. From the different levels. Okay. So yes.
I found
jump in. Okay.
Right after Abraham.
How old was he?
99.
99 years old.
And God said to Abraham, do not call her name. Bless her. Indeed, I will give you to her. I will bless her. She will give rise to nations. Kings of people will rise. Heaven here said, if you say the covenant was following with Abraham, that Sarah was made an equal party of this covenant with God. And just as Abraham's role was saved by the name, so was Sarah.
Okay, so let's just hold on for one second, because this is so powerful. There's a lot we could talk about right here. So that name, when he married her, that name Sarai means my princess. Okay, it was an endearing name that Abraham used for Sarah, my princess. But when things changed and Sarah herself grew in her levels of spirituality, she was no longer Abraham's princess. The word Sarah means princess of all the nations. And now that she's grown herself, she's no longer behind her husband. As Susie just shared, she has equal footing. They're an equal partnership in the mission. It could be it started with Abraham leading the way, but Sarah proved herself and she grew quickly in her own right as a teacher and a light in the Jewish world and in the world at large. I mean, there wasn't really a Jewish world then. They were it, but she was a light in the world so that she can now do her thing. She wasn't hiding under her husband. She had equal footing to him.
Hirsch and Rashi bring there. We just said. Previous to Sarah and Sarah,
Thank you. Okay, great. So yeah, there's a lot to dig into over here in how she's born a certain way. She reaches a certain level when she marries Abraham, and then she kind of grows into the next level of her life. And that is it's global. She is now going to become a global influencer in the world, and she's standing on her own 2 feet. Okay, it's actually there's like I have a little bit of a pet peeve about the word Rebbitzin, right, which is kind of my title, right, officially. So Rebbitzin usually means that the woman is like it's a title that you get when you marry a rabbi. And I kind of like I always had an issue with that. Like I've become a Rebbitzin because of all the work that I've done, not because I married a certain person, right? So like a lot of Rebbitzins like kind of like hover behind their husbands. I kind of feel like many of us actually we worked to have this title. And yeah, it's so so I don't want to get into that. I'm not going to be called rabbi, but in Portland, and it was we had an Orthodox community. Like it's very controversial in the Orthodox world when women become rabbis. It's people that are trying to like I am gonna become a rabbi. I don't have that need. I don't need that title. But the title in Portland, and this was totally in an Orthodox community, but it was in Ladino. They call the Rebbitzin Rabisa, which I thought was so progressive for an Orthodox community, because what it means is Rabisa is Rav Isha, a female rabbi. So even though I would never call myself Rabbi Eve, we actually had a conservative shul in Portland, and the rabbi was Rabbi Eve. So we would always joke, like, you're Rabbi Eve, I'm Rebbitzin Eve, right? We would joke because people always confused us. So I'm not trying. So here's another thing about Sarah. Sarah didn't want the limelight. Sarah worked very hard. She didn't need the title. She didn't need that. Like, for example, the story that I shared last week about Sarah is when Abraham has, he's like the day after his circumcision, and he's like sitting outside in a heat wave. God is making a heat wave so that no guests come, because he loved doing Hachnasat Orachim. He loved welcoming guests, and God is like, just relax. But he's out there in the heat looking for guests, and 3 travelers come, 3 angels. God is like, okay, I'll give you guests. And they say, where is Sarah, your wife? Like, who prepared this whole meal? And clearly it wasn't Abraham. He just had his circumcision. All the servants, all the males are resting and relaxing and trying to recover. Everyone had their circumcisions, right? So clearly it was Sarah that did all the work and prepared everything. And then they asked, but where is Sarah? Like, she's the one that made this. And he's like, my wife, Sarah, she's in her tent. Like, she didn't need to be there. She didn't need to get the reward, the limelight. Like, that was another huge trait of Sarah. She was so confident in who she was. She had such humility. Like, she didn't need the thanks or the fanfare. That was also something. Like, she didn't need the title. Do you understand? Okay. So we're going to go, I think it was page 100. I'm not sure. Remember when we went through all the tests?
Yes.
So I'm going to try to touch upon some of the tests that they went through in their lives. And there are 10 well-known tests that Abraham, we call it the tests of Abraham, but clearly, Sarah was right there with him, and some of them have to pertain to her. So I'm going to try to go through some of them. And before we go there, here's one more really, really important teaching. Okay, so when Sarah was alive, okay, her tent, when we think of a tent, we think of some like dinky, floppy, I don't know, made out of, I have no idea. What do you think when you think of a tent? Canvas or animal skin? Well, what do you think? Glamping. Okay, so I think this was actually the original glamping, okay? Because another thing to realize, like they lived very, very nicely. Abraham and Sarah were very wealthy. They were well-to-do people. Their tent was an oasis of spirituality and mysticism. People came from all over to visit their tent. So you're right. This was like the original glamping. Okay. It was a very uplifting experience. Okay. So we have to understand that when we're picturing what her tent was. Okay. You have to, whatever you thought, if you thought it was kind of crampy, it's not. It's not. She had servants waiting on her hands and foot. She had this amazing tent. She had a different tent to Abraham. Okay. And actually, all the matriarchs have their own tents. And we'll talk about that because as we get to Jacob, he has 2 wives. We'll talk about this, how it all went. And they also had handmaids, right? It gets really complicated. Like, I know. Seriously, you think it's hard now, like 1 wife, 1 husband. It's like, I can't even imagine what it was like. Okay. So, but we're going to try to understand all the feelings that are going on. So, while Sarah was alive, there were 3 miracles that were constantly happening in her tent. Okay. And many of you know this. So raise your hand if you want to share one. Sue.
The Shabbos candles never went out?
Never went out. Her candles miraculously always stayed lit. She would literally blow them out right before Shabbat and then light them again. And they would stay lit the entire week. Okay. So that was one. What was another miracle that happened in her tent? Yeah. Her challah would always stay fresh, always, from one Shabbat, all week. It smelled like freshly taken out of the oven, and it would stay fresh all week long. It was a miracle. It was kind of like this very interesting thing that happened in her tent, always fresh bread. And the third miracle, anyone know? So there was a cloud that hovered over her tent that showed, that kind of signified God's presence. Okay. There was a cloud that was always, it wasn't like a dark cloud. It was a beautiful, fluffy white cloud that showed it was God's presence that was basically hovering over her tent. So these were the 3 miracles that happened in her life. And when we get to the end of the story, I don't know if we'll get there today, but when we get to the end of the story, the moment she dies, these 3 miracles leave the tent. And they don't reappear until the next matriarch comes on the scene. When Rebecca comes on the scene, it's so interesting. This is so mind-blowing, okay? Because once again, there's different levels of understanding. You open the Chumash, I don't know if you want to fast forward to when Yitzchak takes Rebecca into her tent. I'll tell you guys the quote. It's so mind-blowing. Okay, it almost seems like there's a mistake. It says, it's Bereshis Chaf Daled Samech Zayin, and it says V'yivieha Yitzchak ha'ohela, and Isaac brings Rebecca into the tent. Sarah imo, his mother Sarah is there. His mother died, and it literally says, it almost feels like, is this a mistake? And then it says V'yinachim Yitzchak acharei imo, and Yitzchak mourns the loss of his mother, right? This is his moment of grieving. But it's also this amazing moment in realizing that Sarah is no longer here physically, but Rebecca is picking up the pieces, because why did he see his mother in his tent? That could be like a nightmare for some people, right? Like you're like newly married and like you see your mother-in-law or whatever. Imagine, like, so it could be like, but this is this moment of awesomeness where he realizes that his wife has everything she needs to be just as great as his mother was, which he clearly had not grieved enough. So he takes the moment at that time to grieve the loss of his mother, and also to realize that his mother, Sarah Imo, his mother is there. His mother's there, because we learn over here that the 3 miracles that always took place in Sarah's life reemerged in Rebecca's tent. That the challah stayed fresh, that the candle stayed lit, that the cloud came back. Isn't that amazing? So now I want to take it one step further, because we see in deeper meanings that Sarah's tent was the paradigm for a home filled with spirituality. So we could take it on two levels. When we had a temple, there was always three things that had to happen in the temple: the Mishkan, the tabernacle, the Beis Hamikdash, the holy temple. Whenever all the different temples we've had, we always had a Ner Tamid, a candle that stayed lit. I don't think we have one yet in the L'chaim Center. If anyone wants to sponsor one, we need one here, right? We've been talking about that. In a synagogue, you have to have an eternal flame, okay? A Ner Tamid. And in the temple, we also had the showbread, the shulchan, the table that carried the loaves of bread that was there for the priests, and it was always full. There was always constantly fresh bread being baked to feed all the priests and the Levium and all the people serving there. So we had the candle, we had the bread, and the Shekhinah, God's presence at its highest level, the feminine of God's presence, always dwelled. That was the whole reason for building a tabernacle and a temple. It was God said, build me a tabernacle, build me a place so I could put my presence amongst you. I want to dwell with you. That's why God wanted us to build those spaces, for his space to have like a concentrated place of being. Right. Yeah, love it. Right. And that's why we have 2 loaves on our Shabbat table. Right. 2 loaves of bread, because the double portion we got in the desert. Excellent. So now let's take it one step further. Okay, so we have Sarah's tent as the model of what a Jewish home is supposed to be, with God's presence, with all these blessings in it. Obviously, the bread represents the physical, the sustenance that God showers upon us. Obviously, the candles is the spiritual, the light that's our soul, okay? Because the soul and a candle are connected to each other. It says in the book of Proverbs that the soul of man is the candle of God. And that's why we light a neshama candle, like a Yizkor candle, when someone passes. Or for the Yizkor, we light a candle. The candle, a physical candle, could represent a soul. We have in mind someone's soul. It's elevated when we light a candle and bring them down to us and connect on this level. Okay, so now I want to take it one step further. Okay, these 3 miracles also represent the 3 mitzvot of the Jewish woman, right? We have 3 special mitzvot that are only for women out of the 613. I'm going to ask my momentum ladies over here. If you know any, shout it out. You know them.
Candles.
Candles, good. Candles, lighting candles before Shabbat is the woman's job. It's the woman's mitzvah. So, I mean, if there's no woman there, a man could do it, but it's our honor to bring the light into the home. What else? The mitzvah of challah. And by the way, the mitzvah is not eating the challah. I'm sorry. It's making the challah. It's taking the portion. I know. It's elevating this physical act into something spiritual, taking a portion that would have been given to the priests in the times of the temple. Symbolically, we're connecting to thousands of years ago. And we're also connecting to Sarah the matriarch. Right? You understand like how everything is so interconnected. And then the third mitzvah is the mitzvah of family purity, which is for women to dip in a mikvah, and which also that's the cloud. And on different terms, so the cloud represented God's presence, okay? And whether it's the mikvah or not the mikvah, because the mikvah is represented, that's one of the 3 mitzvot that correlates, I would say, to the miracle that happened in Sarah's tent. But on our own levels, wherever we're at, whether we're premenopausal, postmenopausal, it doesn't matter, to think of how you, the woman, brings God's presence into the home on any different level. That is the one that correlates to the cloud. It's being a space where God's presence wants to dwell. Making a little opening in your home for spirituality. When we make a little space, God's presence it comes right in. It's looking for a space where there isn't fighting and corruption and immorality. It's looking for just like a little wholesome space, like a little corner a little corner in a house that's Hashem, that's godliness, that's divinity, that's something uplifting and wholesome. And then God says, I found a little space, I'm coming in. Okay, so those are the three miracles. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
This is what the Chumash commentary says about Isaac and Rebecca. The brief passage describes the meeting that is touching and reflective. Begins with Isaac walking back and the guy who guided it. Isaac and Rebecca. Finally, Isaac left the hidden success with the holy presence of Sarah himself. It was then that Isaac offered for the Jewish Christus is the light and fire of the spirit and Jesus. Isaac was also another man in the chosen people.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you. Okay, so what I'm going to try to do now, and maybe go to, I think it's on page 100. I want to go through some of the tests. I really want to get through this. Maybe I won't get to all of them, but I'm going to give you the main ones. And let's try to glean the traits that we're seeing. Okay, so the first test that we've already mentioned is that until 90 years old, she's barren. Now, probably for any woman, that would be a test. That's a test of who am I? What am I? You know, we have this beautiful prayer where Hannah, she wasn't one of the matriarchs, but Hannah is a very powerful woman in the Torah that is barren for a very long time. And her prayer could break anyone's heart. God, why did you give me these body parts? Why did you give me these breasts? Are they not to nurse a baby? She's fighting God until God says, okay, I'll give you a child. And she has Samuel. She's the mother of Samuel, the prophet. So that is a huge test. She knows that she's, as a prophetess, she knows that she's supposed to become the mother of a nation, but how could she do that unless she's given a child? So in her good nature, she's a very good nature about her, clearly, because she never gets down about her situation. She takes her handmaid and she says to her husband, please sleep with my handmaid, and maybe I will be built up through her child. Okay, so let's just pause over here. Who is the handmaid? Hagar, okay. Do you want to know what the Midrash says who Hagar is? Okay, this is actually, I read this morning for the very first time. I'm still learning, okay? Hagar is, the Midrash says, is the daughter of Paro. Now let's go back a little bit, because another one of the tests that Sarah had to go through in her life is she's abducted not once, twice, because she was so unbelievably beautiful. So in a time, first of all, in the olden days, it was such an immoral world, especially in Egypt, that Abraham and Sarah, by the way, there's a lot of tests. So another test, why are they going to Egypt, is because there was a famine. They were starving to death. So that's another test. So there's a famine. They decide, let's go down and get some food from Egypt. They go down, and as they're about to go in, knowing what they know about Egypt and the immorality, and knowing how beautiful Sarah is, if she would come in arm with her husband, they would kill her husband. If she would go in, first of all, they hid her in a box because they wanted to prevent all of this, but they needed food because they were dying from starvation. So if they would go in and hide her in a box, and if she's caught, they say, oh, she was just taking a nap in a box. I don't know what they would say, but they would say, oh, this is my brother. Abraham is my brother. And then what would they do? They would take her. They would buy her. Right? Oh, it's your brother. Okay, so we're going to purchase you and you're going to be the new queen and blah, blah, blah. Okay, now they have Hashem on their side. So all of these stories, although this is what happened, it was clearly divine providence. There was a lot of, God was with them. So of course they find her, Paro wants to take her as a wife. And do you want to find this in the storyline? What happens is, Paro is inflicted with an illness. And Paro realizes, oh, these are the people of God. God is on their side. I made a mistake. Clearly, this is a married woman. And not only does he give Sarah back to Abraham untouched, but he sends them away with great wealth and his daughter. He's so impressed with them that he takes his princess daughter, the princess of Egypt, and he says, wow, if she would live with such people, she would become a great person. Could you imagine? So that's what I learned this morning. I never knew that. I never knew where Hagar came from. But so Hagar became the handmaid to Sarah as they're leaving that challenge. It's like unbelievable because Hagar was a very loyal handmaid to Sarah until she wasn't. And clearly Hagar was a great person. Clearly she had greatness of her own. We have stories of the angels talking to Hagar. Clearly she was on an elevated level. But Sarah says, I'm going to give my husband to you, and I would love to be built up through you. You have the child. Clearly, it's not going to be me. I'm 90 years old. You have the child, and I'll raise this child, and I'll imbue the spirituality in this child so he could be the forefather of the nation. So what happens? She gives Hagar to Abraham, and they sleep together for one night, and she gets pregnant. And that's when something shifts. All of a sudden, Hagar is full of herself. Clearly I am more worthy than Sarah. Clearly she is not so holy. If after one time I'm pregnant, I'm carrying Abraham's child. What? This is Hagar. Young girl, I don't think it says. Oh yeah, fertile myrtle. Totally. Total fertile myrtle, right? Yeah. But by the way, most of, not all, but many of the matriarchs suffered with infertility. And actually, so when we delve into that, our sages tell us that why put them through so much? It's because God desires the prayers of the righteous. That God is we need it. The world needs it. We need those prayers in the DNA of building a world that God will give them struggles. They do not have it easy. And it's because their prayers really sustain the world. Okay. So she's definitely going through a lot right now. We have her being barren, we have the famine, we have being hid in a box and abducted by Paro, and we have this challenge of how Hagar treats her, okay? And there's a lot of humility. Could you imagine the humility it takes to say, it's not gonna be me, but let it be you, like giving up your dream. Because why? But what are we seeing here? And Gail, I don't know what you've written down so far, but what are we seeing? What's underlying? She's not in her ego. If she got stuck in her ego, she would never give her handmaid to her husband. She would say, if it's not going to be me, it's not going to be anybody. But her vision is so much greater. It's not about herself. It's about the world. It's about mankind. It's about carrying on generations. That's an incredible thing that we see. It's like first of all, she has to have so much confidence, right? She knows who she is. She knows her mission. She's not being shaken by this experience, and nothing is going to tear her down. Okay. Now, it is 12 o'clock. There's a lot more to do. I want to tell you something else that I learned today, which is like, if we're going deep, we're going to go deep. Okay. I've never heard this before, but the commentaries tell us that Sarah was a reincarnation of Chava, of Eve, okay? And Paro was a reincarnation of the snake, of the serpent that made her sin. So in this moment that we have Sarah and Paro that are ready to, be together, and everything is hanging in the balance, right? This is when Sarah, and clearly she has prophecy, and she has a lot on her side. She has a lot of inner strength. But in this moment, she rectifies the sin of Eve. Okay? Because it could have gone in any way, right? I mean, I don't know. maybe one woman would have said, I don't mind being the princess of the queen of Egypt. Like it could have gone in any way. It could, right? And we also learn that a woman is the make it or break it of her home. And I'm looking for the source of that. Hold on one second. It's actually here. Okay, this is so brilliant. This is from the book of Proverbs. It says, Chochmat Nashim Banta Beta, which means the wisdom of women builds her home. And then there's a ... to it. I never knew the other part of it. The second half of that amazing, we say that all the time, Chochmas Nashim Banta Beta, right? Chana, you grew up with that, right? The wisdom of women is what builds her home. But the ... to that saying is the olat biadeha tehasrena, but the wickedness of her own hand can destroy it. It could go both ways. She could build or she could destroy. And at every test, there's always, you could go both ways. So here is this moment, her and Paro, and she does what's right, and she rectifies part of the sin of Eve. Because if you think about it, Eve, she diminished the light of the world, okay? She ruined the first man. She brought some brokenness to that first man. Does anyone know what Adam is referred to? He has a nickname in the Torah. This is pretty crazy. This is like crazy stuff, okay? Crazy stuff. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. So Adam is referred to as the chala of the world. Okay, so do you know where that is? Okay, so that's your homework. I love it. Can we look into that? I have to find the source. Okay, but I could probably I might even have it here. But Adam is referred to as the chala of the world. Okay, well, think about it. How was Adam made? Yes, we know that. Yes, but how was he even formed? Yes, he was made as an androgynous being. How was he formed? From the dust of the earth and the dew of the heavens. Literally, God molded man. That's how it's described. God molded man, and he was called the chala of the world. Okay, and I'm going to try to find more sources of that. But even his name, Adam, comes from the word Adama, which is earth. It's dust and rain. Okay, so Eve, Chava, ruined the first chala of the world, and she also brought darkness to the world. She diminished Adam's light. Okay, and she also brought death to the world. Because what happened, like there was no pain, there was no death before their sin, right? It was a utopian society, and their mistake, we're still trying to rectify for the sins. So let's think about it now as far as those 3 mitzvot. Challah, we make challah, the women make challah for Shabbat. We light candles, we're the ones to bring in the light. And we're not going to go into the laws of family purity, but it has to do with your menstrual cycle, right? That there is this idea that you wait for those days and then you immerse in a mikvah and you come back. What does that have to do with? What is the laws of mikvah has to do with a touch of death? Because a menstrual cycle it's the loss of life. So what? What does it say? Well, what does it say? Okay. So we also see that correlation in the rectification, how we're trying to rectify all the way back to Eve's sin. It's really powerful stuff. It's pretty crazy. And how did I get here? How did I get here? Okay, yeah. Yeah. That's a whole other ballgame. That's a whole other story. Of course he takes responsibility. By the way, so women got the punishment of toiling and having pain in childbirth, we got our periods, right? That wasn't in place before. Everything was going to be like, boom, you know, nice and easy. And what was man's? Man got the punishment to toil. Adam la'amal yulad. That man is here to toil and to work so hard and to find himself and to figure himself out and to have and to work hard with livelihood. That was man's punishment, so to speak. So there's a lot that we still need to rectify till today, but Sarah was the first one on that level to clearly, that was her moment with Paro, was a rectification. That was the first rectification of Eve's sin. Okay, and I think I'm overloading you guys. I wanted to go into the 10 tests, but we didn't get through all of them. We did a few, and I think we'll pick up with that next week. Yes? Okay. So hold on 1 second. I just want to close up this class. I don't want to, first of all, are there any questions? Because I just like gave you guys a lot. Yes? We're going to get there. Yes. We're going to get there. We're going to talk about the reasons. We don't know. Yes. 127. Yeah. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the binding. We'll talk about the other tests. Any other questions that need clarification for today? Yeah, well, clearly it didn't go so well. Okay. So is that in the Midrash? I feel like we read it. Yeah, when Susie and I were reading it over yesterday, we read in the Stone Chumash that it was his sister. But once again, there might be many interpretations. So I don't think that's wrong. Like, for example, we know that Esther, Queen Esther, right? Some people say that she was married to Mordecai, and some people say she was his niece. So there's 2 Jews, 3 opinions, okay? And that's why some people just stay at the pshat, at the face value. Some people take it further. Some people go into the midrash, which is the 3rd way, and some people even understand it on a deeper way. I remember once being here in a class and sharing a midrash, and there was someone in the class that says, I don't like that midrash, like, you know, and that's also okay. Like, you don't need to take it all, you know, we all understand things differently depending on where we're at. Okay, yes. Right. Well, she didn't give up her child. She didn't give up her child, but that's actually a good question. So Hagar would be she would be a fabulous person to analyze also. Like, we'll see how far we could get to, but just know that Hagar is one of the most misunderstood women in the Torah. So clearly there's probably a lot there. So we could talk about her also. No, I mean, it was with her consent. You know, yes, it was. Yeah. I mean, it was, could you imagine what an honor it was? It was at those days, it was considered the greatest honor. Anyway, to be continued, and announcements. Okay. Woo! Thank you. Thank you. You guys want to stay for the announcements? It was so exciting. Woo!